friends, I'm Pastor Tay, and welcome to this video series called Walk by the Spirit. And this is walk number 7. I'm excited and thankful that this series has been good. It's been a blessing to me, and hopefully it is blessing you and giving you insights into the Christian life, and especially how the Christian life is a challenge because there's conflict. And that's what this series is about, explaining the conflict. Again, it's called Walk by the Spirit, and the inspiration comes from Galatians chapter 5 verses 16 and 17. In fact, why don't we go take a walk, okay? And so as we continue in this series, we are going to talk about the reality of this conflict. I covered verse 16 already, and well, we're almost done with verse 17 too, and then we're going to continue on where I give examples and applications of how this really works out in the Christian life. And so in verse 17 there is that phrase at the end, so that you do not do what you want. Actually, let me back up. In the beginning of verse 17, it talks about how the sin nature and the Holy Spirit are in conflict with one another. And Paul really emphasizes that conflict over and over again. It's the sin nature having a completely different agenda as the Holy Spirit, and vice versa. And so it ends with a very surprising statement, so that you do not do what you want to do. And so that's going to first force us to come to a very sobering conclusion, and that is sometimes we do the wrong thing. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we disobey. And the clarification here is that we don't want to fail. We don't want to make a mistake, but we end up making that mistake. And so this is a pretty incredible confession on the part of the Apostle Paul, that hey, you're living the Christian life, you're trying your very best, but sometimes it doesn't work out. You end up doing what you don't want to do. Wow, what a brutally honest confession that is. But that's going to give us insight into the way the Christian life is, and how oftentimes we do things that we didn't plan, we didn't intend, not trying to make an excuse out of it, but sometimes we end up just doing the wrong thing. In fact, how many times have our children done that? If you're a parent, how many times have you said, how many times? Like, how many times have I told you not to do that? And they just kind of shrug their shoulders and they're like, I don't know, because they have no explanation. They don't know what is going on. They're so young, they have no clue what is going on. Why they keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you say things like, I told you 1,000 times, right, not to do that. Why do you keep doing that? And you get all mad and frustrated, and they get frustrated too, and it's just one big confusion. But the truth is, you're just like that. You do the same thing over and over again. You do the very things you don't want to do. You know it's wrong. You have every intention not to do it, but you know what? Sometimes that conflict is so real and so strong that you end up making a mistake, disobeying, and doing the very thing that you don't want to do. So you know what? Can we just take a quick time out here and say, you know what? Stop, frustrating the kids and saying things like that. Like, how many times have I told you? Don't say that. Because the truth is, you're just like that. You repeat the same sins over and over again. And so let's confirm something very, very real here. And that is, sin repeats. Sin by definition is repetitive. We tend to commit the same mistakes over and over again. We end up doing things that we don't want to do. The truth is, we're not very creative. We tend to go back to the same sins over and over again, right? I mean, that's kind of how it is. And so it's not just your kids, it's you, and it's Martin Luther. I was reading a commentary that Luther wrote on Galatians chapter 5, and he was being brutally honest about how when he was a monk, he was really hard on himself, because he kept committing the same sins. Well, he wrote over and over again. In fact, to the point where he thought he must be lost. I mean, how can a Christian commit the same sins over and over again? He didn't understand. And so he tormented himself with the thought that, hey, you must not even be a Christian because you keep committing the same sins over and over again. And then he writes in that commentary that he took time to understand Galatians chapter 5, verses 16 and 17. And as he began to understand it, he began to realize that that kind of is the Christian life. Again, he's not excusing it, okay? He's not downplaying it. He's not in any way saying it's okay that you commit the same sins over and over again. Okay. Got a lot of bumpy music going on here, all right? But what he's saying is that, hey, it is what it is. And again, don't misunderstand. We're not trying to validate it in any way. We're just trying to acknowledge the reality that sometimes we fail miserably. And so Luther said, had I rightly understood the words of the apostle, and he was referencing Galatians chapter 5, verses 16 and 17. His point was, he would not have tormented himself so much. In other words, he would not have been so hard on himself, constantly saying, what's the matter with you? Okay, you must be lost. Why are you committing the same sins over and over again? So he was being very hard on himself, very unrealistic, thinking that it should be much easier. But he came to realize that this is kind of the harsh reality. It's not easy. It's kind of hard. And so, I guess, let me say this and don't take this the wrong way, okay? He's saying we should not be so hard on ourselves. Again, it's hard. Christian life is hard, but don't be too hard on yourself, okay? We should always be hard on sin, but don't be too hard on yourself. Meaning, cut yourself a little slack and acknowledge that the Christian life is often going to be very, very difficult. We're going to make mistakes. But you know what? At the end of the day, you might fall 1,000 times, but you got to get back up. You may fail 1,000,000 times, but you got to get back up. And so let's close with that thought. In fact, the theme of this video series, which is walk by the Spirit. I mean, that's the opening phrase of verses 16 and 17. Walk by the Spirit. So no matter how many times you trip and you fall, you get back up and you walk by the Spirit. And so today, do that. Do the right thing and don't delay.
Thanks for joining us in a walk by the Spirit. If you want to continue with us on our walk, click here to subscribe so you know when the next one is ready to enjoy. For counseling services, go to pastortay.com/counseling. And if you want to see where we have walked before, click here. See you next time. May God bless your day.